Welcome back to Basin Motorsports for another day here in the garage. Today we're going to swap out the front brakes on the Widefox. We're going to go from a single piston caliper and 11-inch rotor and put on a dual piston Brembo brake caliper with a 13-inch rotor. Alright, so what I ordered was the Ford Performance 2000 Cobra R Brembo kit. Now this kit comes in two different boxes, so you get one big box. Inside of that is two boxes, and this is what they look like. So you get basically a left side kind of a kit here and a right hand side kit. Now you'll notice on the label itself it does say left or right, which makes it pretty easy, assuming everything is correct in the box, to make sure you know which side is to which. Now as soon as you open the box, the first things you're going to find is that you have a Goodrich branded line that's made for Brembo here. This is for the Mustang. You've got a bleeding tube here. This is the plastic. And then you have a black Brembo caliper. Now this only comes in black with white lettering, and in this box is your 13-inch rotor. So there's a good look at your rotor. Now this is just a simple slotted 13-inch rotor. I don't think there's anything exactly special about it. This is also the same thing that can come in the Cobra kits and that, but it is fresh, not run at all, and it is fantastic looking. All right, so you guys are going to start asking your question, because I've already got them off of Instagram and that. The question is, why did I go all the way for the Brembo brake kit versus going with the Cobra brakes or with the Cadillac ATS, which are also Brembo? So let's start with the Cobras. Both of them, whether it's going to be this Brembo kit or the Cobra calipers themselves, are going to basically bolt up right to the spindle. There's no modifications you need to make. And for most people, that's going to be okay. I once saw it said online that the Cobra calipers are good for 80% of the people out there. Those that want to push harder with autocross or doing some open track or anything like that, the Cobra calipers are going to tend to bend. So the normal calipers, the GT and the Cobras, you know, the pistons are all on one side and they're on the back side here. So they push this pad over, and then there's a bar, or however you want to call it, this other piece that comes over, and that squeezes itself. So as this pushes here, basically what it's doing is pushing back and drawing this side in. There's no piston on this outside. And so what happens is it starts to fatigue this center section, or what I was told is it does. It starts to fatigue that. The more heavy braking abuse that you put onto the Cobra calipers, it basically fatigues them out. It wears them out. The seals start to get a little too hot. So there's just some things there that I was just like, I don't know. I guess if I really want to push this car as hard as I want to, like going to Optima or anything else, I would rather spend the money up front to put together the Brembo kit, and that it's kind of like the top of the line at that point for at least bolt-on stuff like that. That's Ford-based, I would say. So in order to take this caliper off, it is two bolts on the back side. Now they take a 15mm socket, just very easily just break those loose, kind of take them out. The caliper's nice and loose. Now you can see I've got some boxes here. I'm not yet ready to break the connection to the brake line itself. Once I take that off, it's going to start dripping fluid out, and I don't really want to just sit here with it dripping while I'm taking everything out. So I'm going to set this aside real quick. I'm going to swap out my rotors, take the 11-inch off. I'm going to put the 13 on, and then I'll put on a couple lug nuts here just to kind of keep the rotor captured intact. That way it doesn't really get in the way when I'm trying to put the Brembo caliper on. Now before the caliper goes on, it does need to be assembled with a fitting that comes on the back. So it gets a fitting, a bolt for it, and then two copper washers. So I'll show you kind of how that goes together, but it's pretty simple, real easy to go together. And then at that point with the rotor on, you can put the caliper on, use some blue Loctite, cinch it on there, and then you can torque it down based on this service manual. And then you can break loose that connection so you can swap out the fluid real quick. Okay, so when you get your caliper out, what you're going to notice is there's going to be a plug in the back where the connection is, so you can just take that out. It's just a rubber plug. And then you're going to go get your brake hose kit and get all the fittings out of there. So inside your kit, what you're going to find is you're going to have a stainless steel brake line from Goodrich. And it does have instructions on the back, but they're all in a foreign language, which doesn't help at all. And then you've got your little kit here. So the brass here is your fitting. You also have a clip here that we won't use, or at least I'm not using because I don't have a connection for it. I'll explain later. You've got your eye bolt here, and then you've got your 2 copper washers. So let's get everything out of this kit because this is what I need first off. Okay, so when you get your caliper and you get ready, you know that your nipples for your bleeding is going to be up. So obviously the writing's on the outside, and if I look on the back, this is going to be on the bottom here. So your piece itself is tapered. And you can start to lay it on here. You know that if I did it this way, you can see down in there, in that hole, it's not going to line up. So I can switch it this way, or I can switch this way. Going down means my hose isn't going to be long enough, so it's got to go up. So then you've got 2 options. You can either go away from the caliper or towards the caliper. And I can tell you, going towards the caliper, there's actually no clearance between those. So your piece is going to go facing up, facing away from the caliper, and then you just need to assemble it. So bolt and 1 washer go on the outside, another washer goes between this brass fitting and here, and then just snug it down. So this takes like a 9/16 fitting or a wrench, so I just use this. Very simple. Snug it down. Now you don't have to go crazy tight on it. I'd rather go a little too loose and a little too tight. That way you don't worry about the threads. But you can snug it down on there. You can always use a torque wrench too. Don't be afraid to break out the good tools. But once this is on there, at this point the caliper is ready to go on. So you got your threaded piece in here. This is just literally going to go right onto the caliper or right onto the spindle. And then you can take your 2 bolts there, your 2 fittings that came off, put on some blue Loctite, thread them in there, and the caliper is done. All right, so the caliper on, the rotor snugged down at least to the hub here. Now it's time to check. Before you break the fluid or the line loose, because at that point you're on the clock to get everything done. Before you do that, double check that everything rotates freely, nothing scrapes or anything else. Sounds like we got a problem, and I'll show you why. All right, so here's your rotor, here's your splash guard. These big rotors themselves are another inch in diameter bigger, so your splash guard now has to be bent away. So it gives some room to your rotors. So you can check that all the way around with your fingers. Make sure everything is clear. And then, no problems. So here's your fitting on the line. So this is the hard line coming from the car. This is the rubber line that was on the original caliper. So I need to separate these 2. Just get a separate wrench. It's a 17 millimeter here. It's a 7/16 here because you're looking from metric to standard. But once you break this loose, just know that this fitting is going to start dripping brake fluid, which eats a lot of paint. So have a rag ready to get ready to catch that fluid. And then the time is on. The race is on to get that new line on and secured down to stop the fluid from dripping. Line is on. There it is. Very easy. Show you that. New one on and all cleaned up. And that goes down into the back side. So you just got to be careful knowing that you're going to put a big fat tire on here. You want to make sure your brake line is up out of the way. So at this point, without bleeding it, I am going to put a tire on here and make sure everything spins, fits, doesn't connect or contact anything. Because if I have to break this back open, I don't want to bleed the caliper, then find out that the line hits the tire or something. So now's the time to adjust everything before I do anything with bleeding these rotors and calipers out. All right, so here's the back side of the tire with it mounted up. Now I did have some rubbing right up there where it says Goodrich, right between that and the wheel. So I bent the hard line coming from the car kind of down and away to get that clearance back. But now you can see, nothing is rubbing. We're in good shape there. So now I can take the tire back off and bleed the brakes, knowing that everything's good. All right, so before I take off the wheel, I want to show you guys this. Now, Koenig Wheels actually had an awesome video out couple weeks ago talking about how you determine a big brake kit and buy wheels for it. So if I can get this, I probably can't get it, the resolution. But between this caliper and the spoke of the wheel is about a 3 millimeter gap, which is not a lot. It's really not a lot. It's about 1/8 of an inch, roughly in that range. So just know that if you're going to go with a big brake kit, make sure your wheels are designed for it. They have the profile for it. I don't know these Rovos wheels are necessarily meant to be for it, but I can tell you, just looking down all the way through the scope of the wheel itself, it gets down into, even to the 2 millimeter, almost at the center here. So just be careful of that. I'll put a link up to the Koenig wheels video, but just know that your wheels have to be able to accept a big brake kit. So know that going in, especially if you haven't bought anything, either the kit or the tires, know going in that if you're going to go this way at any point, make sure you spec it up front. This is, I must say, this is a little bit of a luck case for me to be able to do that everything clears, that I don't have to rebuy wheels or add spacers at this point. Now, one thing Scott from Koenig Wheels did say to me, talking back and forth a little bit, was that these calipers can grow a little bit under heat, so just keep an eye on the clearance here. If they do rub a little bit under high heat or high braking and all that kind of stuff, you can add maybe a small shim or a small spacer between the wheel and the rotor here to be able to push this wheel out a little bit. Because you can't space these brakes out, you've got to change the wheel. So, something to keep in mind. But look at that, huh? Oh, that's so nice. All right, so let's talk about the Cadillac ATS brakes. These things have become kind of the new hotness, and they are a true Brembo brake. They're made for a Cadillac ATS, like an 07 to 2011-12, I think is what they were. They are a 4-piston caliper, and they're very comparable to these. Now, the Cobra kit itself, they were about $600, $650 is what I could find for a comparable price to a kit like this. And this kit retails about $1,100. So you're going to say, oh my gosh, spending that kind of money for the extra piece beyond the Cobras? It's hard to say. But talking about the ATS and a comparable caliper, you're thinking that's got to be the way to go, right? It is and it isn't. So for a comparable price to the Cobras, I think they're about $600 for a set. Calipers, lines, they don't exactly bolt up. So in the past, when these things started to get a little bit of prominence and guys have been doing this, I actually didn't know much about them, so I had to do a lot of research trying to figure out if this is the way I wanted to go or not. There was a problem bolting them up. The spread on the, I guess you'd call it the threaded inserts, or however you want to on the calipers, doesn't exactly line up with the Mustang's piece. They're a little bit wider. So you had to grind out the spindle just a little bit. Now just imagine this is a one-way street. Once you start grinding these out, they don't work for the standard Mustang calipers anymore, whether it's the Brembos or the GTs or anything else. So once you go there, you can't go back. So it kind of made me hesitant if I wanted to drill out or slot out the spindles here, especially if I change later on. But now there are actually inserts available where people are manufacturing them. They go right into the spindle here. They're actually a little bit slotted, and the ATS brakes bolt right up to the spindles now with those adapters. You do have to run, I think, a spacer on the front here because of the clearance. Now again, I showed you this is like 2 to 3 millimeters. I believe the ATS calipers on a similar wheel to mine would be about the same. So you may or may not need the spacers, but I believe the kit I saw from foxbody division, I believe they have one. And I don't know if it's their kit or somebody else's, but I saw them post on Instagram. So you can check them out. They are putting one together. I think somebody else said they had another kit just like it. So comparable price for the ATS brakes is about somewhere in the 600 range is what I expect out. So comparable to the Cobras, a little bit better caliper than the Cobras for a comparable price. And especially with the adapters that go straight in, it may be the way to go. Why did I go this way? Well, it's a bolt-in, so I don't have to adapt anything. And I don't know, vanity, I guess. I could, so I did. No big deal. spend a little bit more money, but at least I'm using kind of the Ford-ish parts, I guess you could say, where I don't have Cadillac on my calipers. Some people will get offended by that, but then again, I'm wearing a Chevy hat today, so go figure that. All right, now it's going to be time to bleed these brakes. Now to bleed these, the calipers themselves has pistons on both sides. So you've got a nipple on both sides, a bleeder nipple on both sides of the caliper, an inboard and an outboard. I looked up because the instructions here that come with the calipers don't actually, they're all in, I don't even know what language, German, Dutch, something. They're not English. So went online, looked up how to bleed these calipers, and believe it or not, I think I found 4 different ways. So somebody said it doesn't matter, bleed it all, whatever else, just follow the normal process of farthest away first, closest last, which makes sense. There was somebody else that said always do the outboard first, the inner next, and then the outboard again to make sure they're all the way out, but follow the same process. So doing the farthest first, closest last, which made sense. Saw another one said inboard, outboard. Doesn't matter. Somebody said it just doesn't matter, just bleed them, done. So I haven't run this in about 4 months. I haven't changed the fluid in, I don't know, since I did all the brake stuff a couple years ago. So I'm going to bleed out the whole system. It shouldn't take much. I'm going to use some fresh fluid. Always use fresh fluid when you're doing brake stuff because you know an open bottle catches moisture in there and you don't want to put that in your system. So I'm going to use my one-man bleeder from Harbor Freight. It does pretty well, and this really shouldn't take long because all I've done is add in a caliper with air, a line with air, but there should be fluid from the master cylinder down everywhere else. The rear should go really quick, and then I'll bleed out the fronts. Now I'm going to use the process of outside first, inside second, outside again for third, and I'm going to follow the process. Right rear, right front, left front. And it shouldn't take very long to do this, especially with a one-man bleeder going really quick. With the full system bled, the brakes feel awesome. Again, I started with the passenger rear, then went to the driver's rear, then went to the passenger front, and then to the driver's front. Now I'll say the technique to get these Brembos done completely correctly takes a little bit of time, so you're going to want to have patience. Although you just put in air basically from the connection down to the hose through the calipers, it's going to take a little bit of work and a little bit of patience to get everything out on both sides. So I did start with the outside, then went to the inside, and then to the outside on each caliper. And once I had done the passenger side, came to the driver's side, completed it, and then I went and did it again, just to double check. Now remember, brakes are something you definitely don't want to have a, maybe I didn't do a good enough job on that. Those moments are bad. So take your time on the brakes. And I'll say cleaning out the complete system of air in that, I was really kind of surprised at how much actually came out of the rear. So I'm good shape there, felt very good. Now again, on the tools on this, it's a 15 millimeter socket to take the calipers off. And then it is an 11 millimeter wrench on each nipple, on each caliper. So basically you need kind of 2 tools. Socket ratchet to get the calipers off, and then just really a wrench to put the bleeder on. So if you have questions on this set at all, let me know. There's one specific thing that I didn't mention so far. The master cylinder I have is best used for a 2-to-1 ratio on the piston size on the front to the piston size on the rear. So you want 2 times the piston amount on the front caliper versus the rear. The rear caliper I have is at 38 millimeter. And you think about that, what it means is I want 2 times 38 on the front. The Cobras are a 38 millimeter dual piston, so that would have worked straight away, no problems. The Cadillac ATS are a 42 millimeter piston. So what I would have really done by adding those is kind of mess with the balance a little bit. It's not going to be like critical that the brakes won't work at all. Just going to upset it a little bit. These are a 36 and a 40, and so it averages out to 38. So it fits very well with the 2-to-1 ratio, which is also an added benefit. If you went with the ATS and you can swap out the rear, there is a 42 millimeter caliper out there. I think it's from a Crown Victoria maybe. You'll have to look it up, but there is one out there that's a 42 millimeter that you could switch to that and match the Cadillac ATS, plus keeps the balance front to back. So if you guys have any questions on this kit itself or any of the tools or the process, let me know. Drop it down in the comments, hit me a like, subscribe, any of that. Otherwise, it's a pretty easy process. These things bolt right on. And one last thing, always top off your master cylinder after you're done to make sure it's full, and make sure you clean your rotors. I haven't done these yet, but they will have a little bit of a film on there just to preserve the surface from rusting. So make sure to clean those off before you throw the wheel on and go for a drive. Otherwise, we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to get out there and test these things. They are awesome.